Hey everybody, Yuri here and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be doing a trailer breakdown of the Dishonored 2 E3 Real trailer. We're just going to get right into this. So I'm going to go pretty in depth with this, but I'm not going to sort of dwell too long on all the small irrelevant things. But I just kind of wanted to do this and get out of the way. I know it's been a little bit late, but I've had some troubles with recording lately, so it's going to be a little bit later on down the line. So I'm going to do this. This is actually the second time I've had to do this, so I at least have some mental notes in my mind instead of going in blind this time. So I'm going to try and go as in depth as possible, but without talking about the crap that doesn't need to be talked about. So just going to get started. Okay, so as you can see, the game is being developed by Arcane Studios. These were the same guys that made the previous game, so it is being developed by the same people. Obviously, now that we're in the next gen compared to the last one, the game is going to be in a different engine, so it's going to be different, but at least we've got the same guys developing it, and the team hasn't changed. So hopefully they'll stay pretty true to what the previous game was. Okay, so right off the bat we've got this shot of an island. Now this looks a lot like Dunwall. You can see the city in the background along the side of the mountain. But what this really stood out to me was this rock over here. This kind of gave away a bit where it was. This recognize if you go do the sewer mission right at the end of the sewer when you're talking to Samuel. This is the view you get, and you see the exact same mountain in the background. You get the city of Dunwall along here, and even this rock is exactly the same. You can see it in the background, and a whale ship goes past behind the rock in the background when you're talking to Samuel. So what this suggests to me is the game is going to be set in the same place. It's going to be set in Dunwall. We obviously know that the game is set in the future, but we'll find out more about that later on. It becomes a bit more obvious. But the game's going to be set in the same place, as we can tell from this image. Obviously, it is looking a lot nicer because it's done in a new engine for the current gen. But I just thought I'd show this off. This is actually a place which was in the previous game. So that suggests to me that instead of just sort of going, oh yeah, it's similar, it's on a beach and a mountain, so therefore it's Dunwall, it looks like they're actually going to take the care and attention to make the place the same as Dunwall, because this is actually like pretty specific. Like the fact that they've actually gone to the effort to make this rock as the same shape as it was in the previous game shows that they are putting a lot of attention to detail.
It's happened again. Someone's pulled the rug out from under.
Okay, so this bit's pretty interesting. Essentially, we've got some guards here. Now, as you can see, the armor is different to any of the armor in the previous game. The way the armor works in the previous game, most of the guards wore... It sort of works along a colour system, so most of the guards actually wore sort of grey armor, sort of light grey armor, and that was the standard colour. And then the slightly higher dudes wore the sort of long coats, which were a bit of a black. And then you got the higher ranks, the really high ranks, which you only really saw in the Golden Cat, in the cat itself. They wore the sort of light blue, and then you could tell that they were the highest ranks. But these guys are wearing white, and we haven't actually seen any guards wearing white in the previous game. So obviously at this point, Emily has been has been the Empress for about 20 years at this point. So we don't know how she's changed it, but all that we know is the uniform is different here. These guys are just on a sort of patrol, which you'll see in a minute. So I'm assuming that this isn't any sort of high rank, but I just thought to point out the fact that the armor has changed. Something else I wanted to point out here is, as you can see, they do have pouches on them. Now, both these guys have pouches, and they look like they're attached to the belt, so they're attached to the armor itself. Now, the reason why I thought this was worth noting is because in the previous game, not every guard actually has a pouch on him. Now, usually when the guards have pouches on them, they have money in them, and not every guard had the pouch. Some missions had more guards with pouches than others. For example, the tower only had about 4 or 5 total, but say Golden Cat had about 10 to 12 with pouches on them. And even when they did have pouches, they only ever had money in them. But the reason why I thought this was interesting is because if this pouch is built into the suit, this could mean a few things. First of all, it could maybe mean that every single guard would have a pouch. Now, what I thought would be interesting to see is whether that means every guard is going to have money on them, or I thought it'd be interesting to see if they mix it up, because the assassins, every assassin does actually have a pouch, but the assassins' pouches don't actually have money in. The assassin's pouches, they have the same pouch, but they have bolts. So what I thought could be, this is all conjecture, but I thought it'd be pretty interesting to see if every guard has a pouch, but maybe they'll have different things. So one time you'll pickpocket them and you'll get money out of it. Another time you might pickpocket them and get some bullets, or another time you'll get some bolts. But if it is attached to the suit, then it looks like maybe every guard will have this by default. Maybe sometimes they'll even be empty. The other thing that this made me think with having the pouch attached to the suit is maybe it'll be a little bit harder to actually pickpocket them, because in the previous game you could just crouch behind them and press E and then you basically just absorb it into yourself. But if it's actually attached to the suit itself, you might actually have to go to some effort to actually take it off them. Maybe it'll be a bit more difficult.
An empire at your feet, and you've lost.
Okay, so we can see a few things here. First of all, there's obviously some sort of firing squad. As you can see, these guys are wearing the same coloured armour and stuff, and they've got the pouches as well. So far, every guard we've seen so far has had a pouch on them. But as you can see, there's some sort of firing squad. Now, whether or not this has been allowed, we have had the story confirmed that, well, some details have confirmed that a dictator has taken over, so I'm assuming this is the doing of the dictator. But the thing that's the most interesting about this scene is this sort of robot thing here. As you can see, it's completely made out of metal, and it's got a sort of arm sword thing. We'll see more of those later on in the trailer, but I thought I'd point this out now, just because I think these guys are going to be really difficult enemies. Because if you think about the way the mechanical guys were in the previous game, it was mainly just the tall boys that were mechanical, and to kill them you had to get to the flesh by climbing up on top of them and stabbing them. But these guys don't have any flesh at all, so I think if there's no way to easily kill them, they don't have any weak spot, it'll be really difficult to kill these guys. So I think that'll make for a pretty neat change to have enemies that are really difficult. In the previous game, there weren't any particular enemies that are difficult. The assassins were kind of awkward if they're like pulling you about and they're teleporting, and the musical overseers kind of sucked, but you could just shoot them in the foot or throw a grenade at them and they were easy. So I think it'd be pretty good if we got some sort of enemy which was like really difficult to face against and maybe weren't particularly common. So that's why I like seeing these, but we'll talk more of those later on down the line.
It all. Be honest. Did you really deserve any of it? More.
Okay, so as you can see, we've got a bit of a close-up on his face here. You can see the eyes there, and then the mouth. I mean, it's a bit blurry, and we don't get a better shot, so this isn't guaranteed that it is the face, but it looks a lot like it.
Important. What would you do to get it?
So this didn't really look like a big deal, but if you did play the previous game stealthily, you'll know, and maybe you saw there was actually a tip that told you about this in the loading screens. When you eavesdrop on people, you can actually get some pretty useful information that will help you out in the mission. And as you can see from the perspective of the assassin, whose identity is yet to be confirmed, she's looking down on her and they're having a conversation. So that would suggest to me that the sort of idea of eavesdropping is going to be in the game still, because she is listening in on these guards' conversations. So yeah, that was interesting. I also want to say, because obviously I'm more focusing on the visual stuff for this, not the audio, I just want to sum up what the outside is actually saying here. Essentially, he's talking to Emily, which we'll find out in a minute, and he's saying that she was the Empress, and she finally had the sort of the kingdom under her control, and she's had it taken away from her, and he wants to know how far she will go to get it back. So that's pretty much sums up what he's saying, but we'll talk about more on that a bit later on down the line.
Back.
Okay, so as you can see, she was over here, and then she jumped across, and we'll see from the landing here that she sort of like ran and then jumped across. So this game, maybe it'll have a bit more free running, more sort of Assassin's Creed style free running, maybe like Dying Light, which the thing with free running is very difficult to do in first person. I think Mirror's Edge did it really well, but a lot of people don't agree. But Mirror's Edge, that was its prime focus, so as sort of a secondary thing for the game, it's very difficult to make a free running mechanic that work. Dying Light tried, but it was really broken and buggy for a lot of people, so it'll be interesting to see if they do actually have a free running system in there in the first place, and if it will actually work. But yeah, I also noticed that when she landed, the puddles splashed up. Now obviously this is a trailer, it's not actual in-game footage, but I'd love to see if like there was splashes, because puddles and stuff never splash up nowadays. That's not something people are working on, and I feel like they should be. So if there's water physics, then I just thought I'd point that out.
There's always a price to
Okay, so she is free running a bit more here. There's not much more to say other than she is doing it, so I just thought I'd point it out.
pay. What you decide will ripple across the years. Blood in the
Okay, so as you can see, this guy is effed up. Now, obviously he's dead, but he's clearly got some sort of disease. Maybe he looks like the Flood from Halo. So maybe the plague went, maybe it didn't. We never actually found out in the previous game whether they managed to eradicate the plague or not. So this would suggest to me that maybe either, even though we're about 20 years in the future, the plague is either A, still knocking about, or maybe it's evolved and actually got a lot worse. We can't really say anything. All this really shows us is the plague is still in the game, and this is looking really HD so far, so that's pretty cool.
gutters and corruption on the wind. It'll be fun watching this unfold.
Right, so this is big. As you can see, she's got this grapple thing, and this serves as more than just a grapple, which we'll see later on down the line, but at the moment it just looks like a grapple. And she's doing this to get from where she is on the ground now up to the top of this building. Now, this is very similar to Blink, and we don't see Blink at any point in this trailer, so we haven't had it confirmed that we do have Blink. But this is what interested me because Blink was something that a lot of players used a lot. Some people avoid it altogether, but a lot of people do use it a lot. If you don't know what Blink is, it's essentially a short-range teleport. It's very good for getting around. It's very good for getting around unnoticed because if you're teleporting, people can't see you. But as I said before, we've had no confirmation that Blink will be in the game, so I think maybe this will serve as some sort of replacement for Blink, this sort of grapple thing. The reason I thought this was interesting was because, as we'll find out in a minute, we are playing as Emily for this. Now, obviously, the outsider's talking to her, and we can see that she does have powers, and we'll see a bit more later on that she does have the outsider's mark. But we don't know why she actually has the outsider's abilities. We know that at this point, Corvo is probably going to be alive because in the endings for the previous game, when it showed Emily putting a little doll down on Corvo's grave, she was about sort of late 40s, early 50s, and in this game she's about late 20s, so we know for a fact that Corvo is still alive in this game. We haven't had that confirmed yet, but if they're going to be accurate to the previous game, like it looks like they are, then we know that Corvo will be alive. So, for all we know, Corvo's just taught her to pray to the shrines and get her abilities that way. But from what I've been listening to, it looks like the outsider has gone out of his way to give her powers because he's saying about how she's messed up and he wants to see what she'll do to get it back. This kind of reminds me of Death Note, if anyone's seen Death Note, the way Light's Shinigami, I've forgotten his name, but Light's Shinigami deliberately drops the Death Note. Actually, don't quote me on that, but he drops the Death Note and he says about how he stays around to watch how Light plays the whole situation out because it's a bit of entertainment for him because there's nothing really going on in his world. It's really boring. So maybe this is similar for the outsider. He realizes that things are kind of falling apart for Emily, so he's given her some powers to sort of mix things up. We honestly don't know how she's got her powers yet, but I mean, I guess we'll find that out later on down the line. But if Corvo is still in the game, then maybe he'll be a playable character. We don't know that yet. What I thought would be an idea, which could be cool, is if we could switch between Corvo and Emily for different missions. So perhaps they'd have different abilities. Like, say for example, Corvo has Blink and Emily has the Grapple, just to switch things up. Similar to the way we played as Dowd in the DLCs, and he had sort of different abilities, and his Blink was different and stuff like that. So maybe we'll be able to switch between them, or maybe she does have Blink and we haven't seen it yet, or maybe this is a replacement altogether, who knows.
What will you do with the power I've given you?
So he said there, what will you do with the power I've given you? Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that he's gone out of his way to give it to him. Like I said before, in my opinion, I do think that's what's happened with the whole Shinigami analysis, that maybe he's just doing it to get some fun. But there's no confirmation of that. Just because he's giving it to her doesn't mean that he's just gone out of his way to choose to do that. Maybe she has been doing the shrine thing, because even if he's praying to the shrines, that doesn't mean that she's going to get the ability straight away. If you listen to... I've forgotten his name, a guy in the middle of Colden's Bridge. There's a guy talking to a guard about the lockdown, and oh no, what am I talking about? I don't even know why I was thinking about him. It's a completely different guy altogether. The art dealer in Golden Cat. If you do the non-lethal way of doing that, where you sort of interrogate him with the electric chair, if you further interrogate him after he gives you the art dealer code, if you shock him again, he says that he's seen the Brimsley's family praying to the shrine, and that they're trying to, they have a shrine and they're praying to the outsiders. So, obviously they don't have abilities, because otherwise if you would have heard more about the Brimsleys. So, we know from that people can pray to the shrines and not get powers. So, just because she's praying to the shrines doesn't necessarily mean that she would get the powers. So, even if she did get them through praying to shrines, he would still have to allow her. So, either way, it's really up to him whether she gets the powers or not. So just because he's saying that he's given her the powers doesn't mean that he's just gone out of his way to do it. So we don't really know how she's got these powers, is basically what I'm saying. So I kind of rambled a bit there, sorry about that.
How will you...
Okay, so as you can see, she's looking through binoculars here. We get to see the binoculars herself, ourselves in a minute, because we do actually see later on that she isn't wearing an optics mask. Now, in the previous game, you could get an optics upgrade so you could zoom in. However, a lot of people didn't use that. A lot of people didn't even buy the upgrade. A lot of people didn't even realise it was a thing. So it doesn't really matter, but some people did use it. So I like that she does have these binoculars. I'm assuming you will be able to use them in the game, but who knows, maybe it's just for the trailer. But it's good to see that she hasn't got the mask, so that she won't be able to zoom in, but they have thought of a way around this. Again, it's just attention to detail. They kind of thought about the fact that in the previous game you could zoom, and now she doesn't have the mask, so how are they going to get around that? And they have thought of a way of doing it.
Make your mark. on this wretched world.
Yeah, there it is. You can see it in a hand there. So we don't know who this guy is just from the trailer, but we do know that this Dunwall was taken over by an assassin, sorry, a dictator, but we don't know if this is the actual guy, maybe just someone working for him. I think he's the new royal physician, but we will come to that in a minute. Okay, so this is a really interesting shot. We've got quite a lot going on here. This painting is a Sokolov painting. This is another reason why I thought he's the royal physician, is because if Sokolov is still acknowledged, then I see no reason for him to not be the current royal physician. But obviously, this guy, we'll see in a minute, he's the designer of these robot things we saw, and perhaps even more than that. As you can see, he's quite clearly working with the technology. But I don't know where Sokolov actually went, but this is a Sokolov painting. That is him in the painting, so there are a couple of other things that lead me to believe that he's the new royal physician, but we'll come to those in a second. The other thing that interested me with this shot is, as you can see in the background here, there is an empty whale oil tank. Now, obviously it is empty, so there's no guarantee to what I'm about to say, but what I think here is that the people, even though it is about 20 years in the future, I think the people are still using whale oil as a fuel, so people will still be killing whales, etc. But it is empty, so for all we know, that's just a sort of memento or an office decoration. But the fact that he has it there suggests maybe he is still using it, maybe the people are still using whale oil, but again, that's just my sort of guess. So here's the first thing that suggests he's a royal physician. First of all, just the fact that she opens the door and the entire home shifts, and you'll see a bit later on he pulls a lever and the entire corridor moves around. So obviously in the previous game, Sokolov had a really complicated house, and this one's like the next level of that. So that was something that suggested to me that he was the royal physician. Okay, so as you can see, we've got the head of one of these robot things and the body of one of these robot things. We'll see the robots in more detail in a minute, but I think this was a pretty big thing because if you go into Sokolov's house, he has a lot of his work in cases. Downstairs, he has, say for example, there's a bit where he has one of the big spotlight things just in a glass case. So obviously this guy's done the same thing, he's put his work in a glass case, which is very similar to how Sokolov played in the previous game. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean he's a royal physician. Nothing in this so far would suggest that he's definitely a royal physician. He could just be an engineer or a physician who's pretty high up. It doesn't mean he's the royal one. But that was just my guess pretty much. But he's done a lot of the same things that Sokolov's done, and that would just suggest to me that he has replaced Sokolov. We don't know what happens to Sokolov because it depends how you play the game. He most likely dies unless you go out of your way to save him, but it is possible that you can save Sokolov by doing the extra mission where him and Piero actually make a massive arc pylon tower, which can kill all the guards, which was a side quest, which you can do that to save them, but I'm assuming they die if you don't do that. So it will be weird to see the way they do this, because obviously we've gone from last gen to current gen, so they can't really read your saves if you're on a different hard drive. So I don't know how they're going to work that to say, oh yeah, Sokolov's dead, because they're going to have to think of some way to write him out of the story, because for some people when they played the first game he died, for some people he didn't. So I'm really looking forward to see the way they sort of link the stories together based on the fact that different people had different endings for the previous one. But I definitely think this guy is the royal physician just on his work and the way he acts. Okay, so as you can see, we do have the crossbow here. Now, what interested me here is, I'll just show this. Yeah, she actually puts the bolt in as opposed to it just being in. However, well, obviously Corvo never really does that, but then when he is reloading, the crossbow actually goes off screen, so you can't really see what he is doing. But the crossbow looks exactly the same as in the previous game. It looks like the same tool. Maybe Corvo's handed it out, maybe we've had a new one made, who knows. And as you can see, she's using the grapple thing again, and you can actually just see, you'll see it better in a minute, the faint out, well, it's not faint, but it's blurry. The outsider's mark here is on her left hand, and as you can see, there's sort of a circle around the crossbow, and as you'll see in a minute, that is the upgrade, which means that the bolts reload themselves instantly instead of you having to reload them. So whether or not this is supposedly later in the game and she supposedly bought this upgrade, or whether the crossbow came default with that upgrade, I don't know. but it is there, so I'm assuming that that upgrade, whether it's default or whether it is still an upgrade, I'm assuming it will still be in the game nonetheless. So that when she fired that crossbow, there were a couple of other sound effects in the game which I've not in the trailer, which I haven't really mentioned because it wasn't a big deal. But if you listen to that crossbow sound again, that is actually the same sound that was used in the previous game, which I thought was interesting. If they're shifting from past gen to current gen and they're shifting engines, I thought it was interesting that they're still using one of the same sound effects. But the reason why I thought that was really good is because if they're supposedly using the same design of crossbow from the previous game, I really like that they've gone to the effort to actually get the same sound effect as well. I think that's really good attention to detail, but yeah. Okay, so here you got more of these robot things. If a robot can react quick enough that she can use the grapple to pull herself forward and shoot, and it can hit the crossbow bolt out of the air, then these guys are going to be tough to fight, let's put it that way. Also, another thing that leads me to believe that the grapple is going to be a replacement for Blink is how quickly she actually travelled then when she grappled, but that was just a small thing. So as you can see, she isn't wearing the mask here, but we've already touched upon that.
Everything is in motion. All of it has led you to this exact second in time.
Okay, so as you can see, she just stopped time. Now, how you do that in the previous game, that was an ability called bend time. However, it just slowed time at first. When you got bend time 2, that was when it actually stopped time. So I'm assuming that's going to be in the game, whether or not that'll be different or the same. Oh, the rhymes. I mean, it's not really a big deal, but it looks like it's going to be in the game, which is good because that was a really fun ability. Now, sorry, I took off. Now, as you can see, everything did freeze altogether, so this may be just because she has bend time 2, or maybe it just freezes them all together from default. We don't really know at this point, but it is safe to say that the ability will most likely be in the game. Don't know what that was, but it was an exploding bolt and it looked pretty neat. Okay, so there's the blade there. Now, a lot of people are saying, oh yeah, it's Corvo's blade, it's Corvo's blade. It does look very difficult? It does look very similar in design, and it looks like it'd work in the same way with the way you've got the hilt thing here, and the shape of the handle is the same. The reason why I think this is actually a different blade is because the colour of the handle itself is actually different. It's a sort of beigey colour, but in the previous game it was more of a sort of medium, sort of darkish grey colour. But this is another thing where I'm saying it links to the previous game. You actually lost all your gear at the start of Flooded, and you had to go and retrieve it yourself. However, that was optional, so not everyone did actually retrieve the gear, so maybe for some people Corvo's sword's still stuck at the bottom of that massive tower thing. Maybe some people saved it, but I don't think this is the same blade. I think maybe Piero survived and he's remade all of the crossbow and stuff, and that's why the crossbow's the same. But I think he's just sort of used the same design. So I think this is based on the same design, and I think it'll work very similar to the previous game, but I don't think this is the same weapon. So the reason why this interested me is just because she looks like she's dodging a lot. Now obviously she is a much smaller, much more nimble, a bit quicker than Corvo. Corvo is a bit heavy and bulky, so I'm thinking that maybe the combat will be slightly different in the way the game plays. I think this would be particularly interesting if, like I said before, if you could switch between Corvo and Emily. It'd be interesting to see if the combat actually changed between them. Based on the fact that they are different builds and they have different combat styles, but we don't even know you will be able to change between them yet, so that's pretty much just conjecture. Okay, so here she's just using the grapple again to pull herself down to the bottom floor. The reason why that interests me, that's not really a big thing, but the thing is, when you blinked in the previous game, when you blinked forward, the actual length of it took you to travel, the length of the blink, the duration it took you to travel it, sorry, was actually much shorter when you were blinking forward than it was when you were blinking down. For some reason, if you blinked directly down, you sort of floated down compared to actually teleporting. But she just grappled down to the floor and she went at the exact same speed. That was really just a core mechanics type thing. That was not really a big part of the game and means nothing to nobody. But just I'll point out that when you blink looking straight down, you're a lot slower than when you blink forward. So I thought it was interesting that she grappled down and it was the same speed, but that's something that probably not a lot of people noticed about and basically no one cared about. Okay, this is hard to get hold of. Let me just try and get this. Okay, that'll do. So as you can see, this is a arc mine, which was only available in the DLC for the previous game. So the fact that Emily's using it, maybe this is a different type of mine, because obviously it is in the future, so maybe if they've got these robot things, maybe the technology is better, so this could just be a sort of standard mine now. But as you can see, if Emily is using it, then maybe this will just be a standard piece of equipment in the game. Obviously in the last game it was DLC, but I just thought it was interesting because in the base game you didn't get this, but if Emily's got it, then I'm assuming this will probably be base. Maybe we'll still have spring grazers, maybe these will replace spring grazers, we really don't know, but I just thought I'd point that out, that it might not actually be the arc mine itself, but it's at least very similar. This is what I was talking about before, about what suggests he's the Royal Physician. He just like pulled the lever and the entire corridor shifted. It's pretty neat. So this was really weird. So she's not in bend time here because the time's moving a bit slower, it looks like, but the time is still sort of going pretty much the same speed, not that much slower, if even slower at all. Let me just try and go back to this. But the reason why this interests me is because she's clearly got these sort of snake arm things. Now, these are a different colour to the Grapple, and this looks sort of more like smoke compared to the Grapple looks ropey. So I'm assuming this is a different ability. But that's reminding me of, if anyone's played the Darkness 2, oh, well, 1. I say the Darkness 2 because I've played that one, so I can compare to it better. But if anyone has played the Darkness, then you'll know. This is what sort of reminded me. Essentially, in the Darkness, you have these sort of snake arm things, and you can use them as a weapon. But the more you use them, the more evil you get. Like, as you use them, you get more and more evil as you go on. So maybe this is similar. You kind of hear a voice when she switches, but that isn't necessarily evil or anything. Just because in the previous game, when you use an ability, you hear a voice. Like, say, when you use Dark Vision, you hear it say Enhanced Eyes. It whispers Enhanced Eyes. So maybe that's just the ability. Maybe that's not anything in particular, but it could be these things talking. It does kind of look like it has a sort of snake head, and as you'll see later on, she uses them to grab the thing, but we'll get to that in a minute. So she's kind of pulling herself along by these arm things, kind of like an animal, which is kind of weird, which is why it suggests to me it's something more than just her, but yeah. So he says a pretty important line there. He says, he says something like, wait, let me listen to it again, because I don't know it word for word.
Before you strike. If you kill me, you become the assassin we claimed you were.
Okay, so he says here, if you kill me, you'll become the assassin we claimed you were. Now, maybe this is just a callback to the previous game, or maybe that they've sort of failed with the story, but this worries me, because that is pretty much the same story as the previous game. If the Lord Regent said that, it would have fit just as well as him saying it when you're killing the Lord Regent, so hopefully they don't mess up with the story. Hopefully it just doesn't turn into a repeat of the previous one. But obviously some dictator takes over. She was the Empress and now she's not. So obviously some sort of dictator comes in and somehow accuses her of assassination, and she ends up losing her job as the Empress and she's trying to get it back. It's all a bit weird, but the way she's acting now, it looks like she's not entirely in control. But I thought it'd be interesting because obviously whatever this sort of mode is, sort of evil mode, she's using it for multiple things. She's using it to a different way to move around. She's using these arms as a weapon. So I really am looking forward to seeing how this plays out, how this sort of evil mode plays out, if it is a different mode altogether. Maybe it's just one ability where you get these arms. I don't know. Hopefully they're not ripping off the darkness too much. Ripping off the darkness too much. And likewise, hopefully they don't end up just remaking the previous story. He is dead though.
The years are long, but it's always good to see
Please.
a familiar face. Years are long.
Let me get this. Dude, stop suggesting stuff. Okay, so that's the outsider. He actually looks a lot younger, but I'm pretty sure that's just because like the engine and the way the graphics have changed. I don't know if he is actually any younger. He's a figure of myth, as the previous game says, so he's not real, so it doesn't really make sense that he would be younger. But the thing that most interested me about this particular scene is that's Corvo's mask, and it looks like it's just washed up on a beach somewhere. So that is in reality. Now, the Outsider, we never see him anywhere in reality. The only times we see the Outsider is either A, in the Outsider's dream, which is his own world, or B, when you're at his shrines. But when you're at his shrines and you take the rune, it kind of goes a bit weird, as if you are kind of stuck between the real world and the Outsider's dream. So this is the first time we've actually seen the Outsider in the overworld, like normal. So the reason why this interested me the most is because this kind of brings me back to the thing of maybe he's just getting some entertainment out of it, maybe he's just getting a kick out of it. But I think that maybe he's going to be coming into our world, he's going to be doing some stuff. I think he's going to play into the story a lot more. In the previous game, he was just sort of like, oh, here's the reason why you've got your abilities, and also some extra lore, and that was about it. But I think he's actually going to play into the story of this one a lot more. Maybe we'll actually see him in the story. Maybe he will have effect on it. I don't know, but I just thought I'd point out, because I've watched a few other trailer breakdowns and people just basically said that he was back in the game. No one really mentioned the fact that he's here in the overworld and we've not seen that before, but yeah. Also, this is quite obviously Corvo's mask, even though it's pretty destroyed. So whether or not we get to see Corvo again, play as Corvo again, something obviously happened where his mask ended up destroyed and in the water. But yeah. Now, if he's dead in the game, if it turns out he does die, I'll be a little bit annoyed because that doesn't really go along with the previous game. But so far, neither with the timeline if he's dead, because, like I said before, in the endings, either way, you end up seeing her go to his grave when she's way older, so it doesn't really make much sense. But anyway, we'll just move on. And by move on, I mean finish up. Okay, that was that. And then just sort of finish up here by pointing everything out at the bottom. Arcane Studios are developing it, as we know. Bethesda are publishing it. I have no idea what a Void is. I've looked into it and I couldn't figure it out. Maybe it's the engine, or maybe it is just some sort of other producer which is helping Arcane. Arcane's a relatively small studio based in France, so it wouldn't be surprised if there was another studio working on it. But Bethesda have some pretty awesome studios either way. As you can see, PC, Xbox One, PS4, the standards. But yeah, so I'm going to wrap this up. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, be sure to leave a like. We loved it, so favourite. Sure to follow me on Twitter, tweets, Twitch streams. Let me know in the comments below if you missed anything. Let me know if I missed anything. Sorry. Let me know if you have any speculative ideas of your own. Let me know if you're excited, and I'm going